The 1970 seconds gave us some of the wildest science fiction ever made. But here's the twist. Many of those films didn't just stumble at the box office, they face-planted. Critics rolled their eyes, audiences stayed home, and studios wrote them off as mistakes. Yet decades later, those so-called failures look more like misunderstood gems. So what happened? Were they too strange, too smart, or just way ahead of their time? Let's uncover the truth about 15 sci-fi bombs that turned out unforgettable. Silent Running, 1972. Imagine expecting a thrilling space adventure, and instead being handed a lonely gardener, 3 quirky drones, and the last forests of Earth floating in space. That was Silent Running. Directed by Douglas Trumbull, the effects wizard behind 2001, A Space Odyssey. It had all the makings of a hit. But when audiences showed up in 1972, they were met with Bruce Dern's melancholic botanist fighting to preserve nature in giant domes. Not exactly the laser battles studios thought people wanted. The film tanked commercially. Critics were divided, some admired its sincerity, others sneered at it for being too slow or too preachy. Adding Joan Baez's folk songs to the soundtrack didn't exactly make it feel like a mainstream blockbuster either. Silent Running simply didn't fit the appetite of its era. But here's the punch. It aged like fine wine. Its themes of ecological collapse, loneliness, and moral duty feel sharper than ever. The practical effects remain stunning. The little drones Huey, Dewey, and Louie stole hearts, and Bruce Dern's raw performance gave the film its soul. Silent Running may have flopped in '72, but today it stands as a visionary work that inspired generations, from Wall-E to modern eco-sci-fi. What once looked like a dud now feels like prophecy. Zardoz, 1974. Few images scream 1970 seconds weirdness. Louder than Sean Connery strutting around in a red bandolier, thigh-high boots, and very little else. Enter Zardoz. Directed by John Boorman. The film looked bizarre even back then. Audiences laughed, critics shredded it, and the box office numbers sank. For many, it was the moment when James Bond's leading man officially lost the plot. But peel back the ridiculous costumes and what you find is surprisingly bold. Zardoz is about immortality, control, and the illusion of utopia. The floating stone head that commands exterminators. It's a satire of power and blind obedience. Connery deliberately took the role to break free from Bond typecasting, and while the gamble bombed financially, it showed he wasn't afraid of risk. Over time, cinephiles began to see past the surface absurdities. Zardoz became a psychedelic dystopia with genuine philosophical bite. Its surreal visuals and allegorical layers are unlike anything else from that era. What was once mocked as nonsense is now praised as fearless. Sure, it's still strange, but that's the point. Zardoz didn't give audiences what they wanted in 1974, but it gave us something far stranger and, ultimately, unforgettable. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Picture Don Johnson as a scrappy teenager wandering a wasteland with his telepathic dog. Sounds like a joke, right? But that's exactly what A Boy and His Dog delivered in 1975. Based on Harlan Ellison's novella, it was a darkly comic, deeply bleak vision of survival after the collapse of civilization. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. Some critics admired the audacity, others were disturbed by its grimness. Its limited release didn't help, and it ended up earning next to nothing. The bleak tone and unsettling finale left most viewers confused or unsettled. This was not a film you took the family to see on a Saturday night. Yet, in hindsight, it became hugely influential. Its vision of scorched landscapes and desperate survivors directly inspired later franchises, especially Mad Max. Don Johnson's rough, unpolished performance gave it raw energy, while the telepathic dog provided an offbeat, unforgettable twist. Today, it's celebrated as one of the boldest visions of the 1970 seconds wasteland. It didn't win at the box office, but it rewrote the rules for how sci-fi could look at the end of the world. Sometimes, the strangest ideas plant the deepest seeds. Phase 4, 1974. An army of ants as the next big-screen menace? That was the gamble of Phase 4, directed by legendary designer Saul Bass. But here's the catch. This wasn't a cheesy giant bug movie. Instead, it was a cerebral, unsettling story about hyper-intelligent ants evolving into something new. Audiences expecting popcorn thrills got slow pacing, surreal imagery, and eerie silence. Unsurprisingly, it collapsed at the box office. Critics were baffled. Too odd for mainstream crowds, too pulpy for art house fans, Phase 4 fell through the cracks. But Bass's vision was extraordinary. The macro photography of ants created a disturbing sense of realism, turning tiny creatures into an unstoppable collective. The film's rediscovered original ending revealed Bass intended it as a symbolic meditation on humanity, merging with nature, a concept far too radical for 1974. Now, it's celebrated as a singular experiment, a work that stands apart from typical creature features. Its hypnotic tone and daring imagery influenced later eco-sci-fi and earned it cult status. What once was dismissed as strange and boring now looks like a haunting piece of art. Phase 4 proved that even the smallest creatures can make the biggest statement. The Man Who Fell to Earth. 1976. David Bowie was already an icon when he stepped into the role of an alien visitor in The Man Who Fell to Earth. Directed by Nicholas Roeg, it told the story of a being who comes to Earth searching for water for his dying world. Bowie embodied otherworldliness so completely that it barely felt like acting. But when it hit theaters in 1976, audiences were baffled. The nonlinear storytelling, surreal visuals, and fractured editing left people confused. Critics called it incoherent, strange, even indulgent. Commercially, it tanked. Bowie's star power wasn't enough to pull it out of the red. Yet with time, the film has been reappraised. Its themes of addiction, corruption, and alienation feel perfectly in sync with the anxieties of its decade. Bowie's haunted performance became legendary, and the movie's dreamlike tone made it a classic of experimental sci-fi. What was once called nonsense is now seen as a visionary portrait of what happens when innocence collides with human greed. The Man Who Fell to Earth wasn't a hit, but it cemented Bowie as a cinematic presence and gave us one of the strangest, most poetic sci-fi films of the era. Westworld 1973. Before it became a hit HBO series, Westworld started as a modest film directed by Michael Crichton in 1973. The premise was irresistible, a futuristic theme park where rich guests could live out their fantasies among lifelike robots. Want to be a cowboy, a knight, a gladiator? Westworld had it all. But then the machines malfunction, and the fantasy becomes a nightmare. Sounds like a guaranteed hit, right? Not exactly. When MGM released the film, it only pulled in middling numbers. Critics called it cold, underdeveloped, even confusing. Audiences didn't know what to make of a sci-fi thriller that didn't lean on flashy effects or heroic leads. The studio quietly shelved it, expecting it to fade away. But time told a different story. Yul Brynner's performance as the relentless robotic gunslinger became iconic. His blank stare and silent pursuit prefigured characters like the Terminator. The movie also broke ground with its early use of computer graphics and its dark exploration of artificial intelligence. Crichton's vision of technology spiraling out of control was prophetic, later fueling both the Terminator and Jurassic Park. Today, Westworld is remembered not as a box office curiosity, but as one of the earliest films to take AI seriously. What once seemed cold now feels chillingly accurate. Sometimes being too early is just as dangerous as being wrong. Damnation Alley, 1977. In 1977, 20th Century Fox thought it had a sure thing. A post-apocalyptic road trip with armored vehicles, mutant creatures, and plenty of action, Damnation Alley looked like the perfect blockbuster. But then another little film called Star Wars came out the same year. Guess which one audiences chose? Damnation Alley was doomed before it even hit theaters. Production problems didn't help either. The special effects were uneven, the story tone shifted wildly between campy and serious, and critics didn't hold back in their reviews. By the time Star Wars was dominating the box office, Damnation Alley was already forgotten, and yet it found a second life. The massive Landmaster vehicle, with its rolling wheels and tank-like design, became a cult icon, appearing in other productions and sparking fan fascination. The movie's bizarre mutants and patchwork storytelling gave it a quirky, almost charming energy. Fans of post-apocalyptic adventures embraced it as a weird relic of a studio scrambling to chase trends. It may have been crushed under the weight of Star Wars, but Damnation Alley remains a fascinating artifact. It's proof that even a so-called disaster can leave behind unforgettable pieces of cinematic history. Logan's Run, 1976. A year before Star Wars, MGM pinned its hopes on Logan's Run, a sci-fi epic with dazzling sets, futuristic costumes, and a bold premise. In this utopia, everyone lives in pleasure until they turn 30. At that point, they're killed in a ritual called carousel. Logan, a law enforcer, discovers the truth and goes on the run. With that hook, MGM expected a mega hit. It didn't happen. Though the movie earned some money, it underperformed badly against its massive budget. Critics praised the visuals, but tore into the clunky dialogue and melodramatic acting. Audiences were curious, but not enough to make it the blockbuster MGM needed. To the studio, it was a disappointment. But Logan's Run refused to fade. Its domed cities, eerie rituals, and blend of utopia and dystopia left a lasting impression. It even spawned a short-lived TV series. Modern audiences see it as one of the quintessential 1970s sci-fi visions, paving the way for the explosion of dystopian films in the 1980 seconds. What once looked like a failure now stands as a classic with staying power. Logan's Run wasn't the hit MGM hoped for, but it gave us a world that still feels ripe for modern reinterpretation. Quintet 1979. Robert Altman was known for ensemble dramas like MAS x H and Nashville, so when he turned to sci-fi in 1979, expectations were sky high. Quintet, starring Paul Newman, delivered something no one expected, a bleak frozen world where society revolves around a deadly board game. Audiences were baffled. Critics called it slow, symbolic, and suffocating. Instead of thrilling sci-fi, they got abstract allegory. The box office response was brutal. Even Paul Newman's star power couldn't save it, and reviewers complained that Altman's usual brilliance at capturing human life was buried under heavy-handed symbolism. Yet, for those who stuck with it, Quintet offered something unique. Filmed in Canada during brutal winter conditions, its desolate landscapes were unforgettable. Its themes of futility, obsession, and survival feel more relevant today, in a world obsessed with competition and distraction. The frozen atmosphere alone makes it unlike any other sci-fi film of its time. Quintet didn't deliver a crowd pleaser, but it carved out a niche as one of the decade's strangest, most haunting films. Sometimes, the boldest experiments fail first, and endure longest. The Black Hole, 1979. By the late 1970 seconds, Disney was desperate to cash in on the Star Wars craze. Their big swing was The Black Hole, a lavish space adventure about a crew encountering a mysterious ship orbiting a black hole, led by a mad scientist. With cutting-edge special effects and a massive budget, it was Disney's most expensive film to date. But it didn't work. Critics were unsettled by its dark tone, which clashed with Disney's family-friendly brand. Audiences expecting lighthearted fun got a moody, philosophical space opera that ended in surreal, almost nightmarish imagery. While it made back part of its budget, it was seen as a major disappointment and failed to launch the franchise Disney hoped for. And yet, looking back, The Black Hole is fascinating. Its visuals remain breathtaking, especially the haunting shots of the black hole itself. Its willingness to embrace ambiguity and cosmic dread was far ahead of its time, foreshadowing the darker, more mature sci-fi of the 1980 seconds. Today, it's beloved as a cult classic, admired for daring to mix family film trappings with eerie cosmic horror. What once baffled audiences now feels like one of Disney's boldest experiments. The Black Hole wasn't just a flop, it was a risk worth remembering. THX 11381971. Before Star Wars made George Lucas a household name, he released THX 1000, 138 inches 1971, a cold, minimalist vision of a future where individuality is crushed. Starring Robert Duvall, the film drops viewers into a sterile world of endless white corridors, faceless guards, and humans stripped of names, reduced to numbers. It was bold, daring, and unlike anything audiences had seen. But Warner Brothers wanted a commercial sci-fi hit, not an experimental art film. Instead, they got a slow, quiet meditation on conformity and freedom. Mainstream audiences were baffled. Critics were divided. Some called it brilliant, others branded it joyless. The box office receipts were dismal, and the studio cut parts of Lucas's vision before release, leaving him frustrated. Yet with time, THX 1138 earned new respect. Its striking design and oppressive soundscapes still feel modern. Its themes resonate with anyone who has felt trapped by routine or crushed by authority. Lucas later released a director's cut, restoring lost sequences and expanding its scope. What was once a flop is now seen as a daring debut that proved Lucas wasn't just interested in space battles, he was already asking big questions about the machinery of control. THX 1138 is a reminder that sometimes the strangest beginnings produce the boldest careers. Capricorn One, 1977. Long before internet conspiracies, Capricorn One tapped into public paranoia. Directed by Peter Hyams, it told the story of NASA staging a fake Mars landing. When the astronauts refuse to play along, they're hunted by their own government. With a cast including James Brolin and Sam Waterston, it seemed like a surefire hit, except 1977 was the year Star Wars conquered the world. Capricorn One, released in the same season, didn't stand a chance. Critics complained about its slow pacing, calling it too talky for a thriller. Audiences wanted lightsabers, not government cover-ups. Financially, it underwhelmed. But decades later, Capricorn One feels eerily relevant. Its themes of media manipulation and institutional deception ring louder now than ever. The desert chase sequences are still thrilling, and Jerry Goldsmith's tense score drives the suspense. Back in 1977, people weren't ready for a paranoid thriller that questioned official narratives. Today, it's recognized as a sharp, daring piece of sci-fi cinema. Capricorn One may have been crushed by timing, but it left behind a story that refuses to feel outdated. The Andromeda strain, 1971, adapted from Michael Crichton's novel, The Andromeda Strain was meant to be a prestige project. The story followed scientists racing to contain an alien microorganism that wipes out an entire town. No space battles, no aliens with glowing eyes, just sterile labs, claustrophobic tension, and slow-burn suspense. Audiences expecting thrills got what felt like a science textbook brought to life. Critics respected its detail, but called it too cold, too clinical, too devoid of emotion. Financially, it underperformed. At a time when viewers craved escapism, the Andromeda strain gave them spreadsheets and split screens. And yet, that's exactly why it aged so well. Its meticulous design and attention to scientific realism made it a landmark in serious science fiction. Later films about outbreaks and viruses, from Outbreak to Contagion, owe it a debt. Its themes of responsibility and unseen threats feel even more chilling today. The Andromeda strain may have felt lifeless in 1971, but now it's seen as prophetic. The real terror isn't a monster chasing you, it's something microscopic and invisible. Sometimes the quietest disasters leave the loudest echoes. Soylent Green, 1973. When people hear Soylent Green today, they immediately think of its infamous twist. But in 1973, it was anything but a hit. MGM expected a major success with Charlton Heston in the lead, but audiences weren't eager to watch a grim tale about pollution, poverty, and overcrowding. The film was heavy, slow, and bleak, and box office numbers fell short. Critics called it heavy-handed and depressing. But Soylent Green stuck around. Its vision of environmental collapse and social inequality feels uncomfortably close to reality. Heston gave one of his most human performances, especially in the emotional scenes with Edward G. Robinson, who was acting in his final role. The movie wasn't about flashy sci-fi, it was a warning, dressed up as a thriller. Over time, its relevance only grew. Today, Soylent Green is remembered as one of the defining sci-fi films of the 1970 seconds, not because it entertained, but because it dared to hold up a mirror to humanity's future. What once seemed clumsy now feels like a bold attempt to say something real. Its legacy isn't the twist, it's the message. Rollerball, 1975. What if the only sport left in the future was a conacrease? Brutal bloodbath designed to keep the masses docile? That was the hook of Rollerball, directed by Norman Jewison and starring James Caan. The film imagined a future where corporations controlled everything, and individuality was crushed by a violent game designed to distract society. On paper, it looked like a hit. Futuristic sets, a tough star in James Caan, and a mix of action with social commentary. But audiences in 1975 weren't sold. Some dismissed it as shallow and overblown. Others thought it was too violent to be taken seriously. Critics were just as divided. The film earned modest numbers, but nowhere near blockbuster levels, leaving it branded as a disappointment. But modern eyes see it differently. Rollerball feels prophetic, predicting a future where corporations dominate entertainment and suppress individuality. Its rollerball matches are still intense, visceral, and unforgettable. James Caan's simmering performance gives it heart, grounding the spectacle in humanity. Today, Rollerball is hailed as one of the sharpest satires of its decade. It failed to capture hearts in 1975, but in hindsight, it wasn't a mess, it was a message. Rollerball proves that sometimes the most misunderstood warnings turn into timeless stories. So there you have it, 15 sci-fi flops from the 1,970 seconds that turned out to be secretly great. Each one was written off as a failure when it landed, yet decades later, they've become cult classics, visionary experiments, or even blueprints for modern sci-fi. Which of these forgotten gems deserves even more love? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button for more hidden history, and remember, every so-called flop might just be waiting for its second act.